Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to this review episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to pinnacle entertainment savage worlds, aimed at beginners and veterans alike. So we got a guest today. Usually it's Harrison and I, sometimes Gary, but for this one, Stefan Dragonspawn.
Yes, hi Eric. Thank you for having me on the show again.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been over a year. You were on the show a couple times. Talk about Shintar.
Shintar a little bit, and what was the other setting that I reviewed or did the...
Yeah, it was Shintar, I think. Yeah, both times. Yeah, it was for their new Kickstarter they had a while back, so... Yeah.
I thought I did another one too, another showdown between two settings. Oh, it was...
Nemesis. Yeah, Nemesis. That's right.
Yeah, Matt with Nemesis versus
High Space.
High Space.
That's right. So, of course, Stefan now on the RPG Brewery.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm happy to have him because this the setting we're going to review today is Thunderscape, and this one it's been on my radar for a while. I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, and I was gonna, and then I remember Stefan had that one. He read it, so I figured why not invite him on the show. That way I don't have to read it and spend all these hours taking notes and all that. Stefan did all that for us, so yeah, I'm excited.
That he's subcontracting to a Canadian company.
That's right. And Stefan and I, before the show, we were talking about this. It's kind of odd actually, because we're both French Canadians, and now we're sitting here speaking English, so you guys can actually understand the review, right?
That always helps.
It helps. So yeah. Let's do that right now. Let's go between the covers. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Welcome one and all to Between the Covers, the hottest and most greased up segment on this podcast. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, things are gonna get a bit weird in here.
No, it's nothing sexy.
Sorry, what?
It's kind of where we talk about a Savage Worlds book from cover to cover.
Like some sort of book club.
Well, essentially, yes.
Well, in that case, I'm leaving. Oh yeah. See you later.
So, Thunderscape, Stefan. Now, this isn't Gary eating too many beans, is it?
No, it could be, but this particular setting isn't that kind of setting. You couldn't easily transport it into Gartar.
That's a good thing. So in a nutshell, what is Thunderscape?
Well, first off, in the introduction, you talk about Thunderscape because it's been the setting itself, or the world, has been around for a while. It used to be a computer game produced by SSI Games in 1995, and actually it was written by none other than Shane Hensley.
Wow.
Some people may know him. So he wrote that for that computer game company, and it had a couple of sequels as well, called Entomorph, Plague of the Darkfall. Well, not necessarily a sequel, but per se, but at least in the same world. And there was even a couple of novels that were written, and one of them was written by Shane Hensley himself. So I had backed the Kickstarter a while back when they were doing the Savage World adaptation, because before they had done another popular D20 system adaptation, so they wanted to do a Savage Worlds version now.
Wasn't there a West End Games version too?
Yes, there was for their Masterbook D6 system as well. Right. So at one point, licensing issues, it was lost for a while. Then finally, Shane Hensley agreed to sell it to Q-Die Games, and they're the ones who did the book itself as a Savage Worlds adaptation.
Oh, that's kind of odd, huh? I mean, the guy who wrote Savage Worlds sells it, and then years later, now it's being savaged by different people. So, but yeah,
but it's a great book. I mean, I backed the Kickstarter. It wasn't as popular as Flash Gordon or Shiny Tar when it came out, but still, it succeeded. And I got the print-on-demand book. It's a soft cover, the standard size, 8.5 by 11, and about 117 pages, full color, really nice printing. Each page at the edges has a bit of a reddish gears-like pattern, and it's well printed. You've got it's clear and concise, easy to read. Some of the illustrations vary a little bit. Some are better than others, but overall pretty good. The maps as well.
The cover's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very evocative. Kind of a female warrior. It seems like rallying people beyond the cover, and a couple of other creatures behind her. And you've got this huge train. They call them thunder trains in this world. So yeah. Really cool.
So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about fantasy, steampunk, sci-fi? What is it?
Well, it's closer to fantasy, because with the world history, it was a fantasy world that changed a lot. There was quite a few wars happening between the various kingdoms, then a period of peace, and then the cataclysm, the Darkfall, where everything became dark for a short period of time. Many powerful wizards disappeared, and all these creatures, demonic kind of creatures, they don't call them demons, they call them nocturnals, invaded, and a lot of people, of course, died. And then some kingdoms changed. One of them became almost a Victorian industrial, heavily industrialized nation. So not so much Victorian, but remove all the English proper society, and it's more survival, post-apocalyptic, but with a fantasy bent.
So probably a bit more like late Renaissance technology instead of more medieval, right?
Yeah. They're a little bit more advanced than medieval. Some nations are a bit still in the medieval style or era, not as advanced. But some others are like one called Urbana is the one that's pushing all this technology and creating these thunder trains and other mechanical marvels.
Okay, so that reminds me a little bit of Eberron with the shards or the dragon marks, and even Winter Eternal with the sun shards. Is there some sort of mineral or magical element that powers all this technology, this steampunk technology in Thunderscape?
Yeah, actually there is, and Urbana is the nation that has one of the highest concentrations of it. They call it manite, from the word mana, so magic. It's a kind of metal, raw ore, a bit like iron, that they mine in the mountains, and they refine, and it can hold and maintain spells in it even better than other materials. So they can use it to power thunder trains. They can make golems, mechanical constructs. Some of them are semi-sentient. They've got what's called the thunder scouts, which are almost like little quads or trikes that some people use to trailblaze. Think of a ranger, but instead of a horse or a wolf animal companion, he's got this vehicle, a bit like Mad Max. So you could have a bit of a Mad Max kind of campaign if you wanted to.
Because there's still a bunch of wastelands from the Cataclysm.
Oh yeah, there's some places that are still wild. The high steppes and the central desert, the Ranate, they call it. Especially that area. Very desolate. Think the Nevada deserts with all the big mesas and stuff like we see in Looney Tunes, the Coyote and Roadrunner.
All right. So yeah, okay. So I can frame it better. I mean, I think just looking at the cover, you kind of get an idea of that, but just want to make sure, because people listening to the show can't see the cover right now. I mean, I'll put a link in the show notes, but that helps set the tone a little bit. So, okay, with that said, now, so who do you play in this setting? Who are you?
All right. So, in the book, that would be in Chapter 2, PC creation and some game mechanics. You have some of the standard races that are associated sometimes with fantasy realms. Humans, elves, half-elves, and dwarves. The half-elves are, unlike other realms, they're not discriminated against in any particular way, and not in general, but they don't have a tendency to settle any roots. And elves are pretty much the standard. There's no different types of elves. There's no high elves, low elves, winged elves, or anything like that. It's just elves. And then you've got a few other special, unique races to the world of Aden, which is the name of the world itself, which we haven't mentioned yet, but Thunderscape is the name of the setting, but Aden, A-D-E-N, is the name of the world.
Okay.
And they're the very small, almost halfling-sized creature called the Fairkin, which are almost like fawn-like. They have short horns on their heads and sort of like goat legs. Very fun-loving, but not always.
Not like satyrs?
A little bit like satyrs, yeah. But they're just short. Yeah.
Can they mow your grass too?
If you pay them enough, maybe one of them will invent a mechanical magic item that can mow the lawn by itself.
Yeah, they're landscapers in this setting.
There you go. Landscape specialists, the gardeners.
No, that's racist. I'm sorry.
And then they've got a few races that are like variations of what we know. Like there's a goblin-like race called a Goro, G-O-R-E-A-U-X, that the Goro themselves say that they're a separate race. Some people say, no, you're just an offshoot, which can be an insult to them. They have a tendency to be very clever, and many of them are very apt with mechanical and technology. You've got then the orc-like Jurak. Again, it's the same thing, like an offshoot of the orc race, more adaptable, not as mean, not as viewed negatively as an orc. They seem to be better tolerated.
Did you say Jurak?
Jurak, yeah, Jurak.
Oh, okay. I thought they were like part orc, part giraffe.
No, not quite.
That'd be awesome, though.
But we'll get to those type of creatures later. Then you've got the lizard men called Rapacians. Of course, cold-blooded. They don't like the cold, so they like warm climates. You've got an insect-like race that is found in certain parts of Thunderscape called Illithics. Think a mix of ant and beetle kind of creature. They're fairly large, roughly human size. And usually they never leave home because they're part of the hive mind. So basically, when you play one, you're in exile. You're not part of the hive mind anymore.
Oh, that's cool. Cool culture.
Yeah. And then you've got the last two. There's one called Echoes, a mysterious race of shapeshifters from another plane. They can assume the shape of other people, sometimes specific people if they study them long enough. And usually their skin is like all black, but not reflective, not like shiny. So it's like matte black. And they hardly have any features.
So kind of changeling, doppelganger type of race.
Kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. But they don't have to kill you to take over your identity.
That's good.
Yeah, they're not necessarily evil. Some of them are, but not overall. And the final one was a former slave race created by the powerful casters of a kingdom called Aramist before the Darkfall. They're called Pharans. Basically, they're sort of anthropomorphic animals. So you can have animals like wolf-like, badger-like, dog-like, cat-like, panda-like, or maybe even giraffe-like, if you want.
I'm sold. I'm getting this book. I want to play.
There you go.
Giraffe, yeah. Man.
The Giraffians. And what's cool about them is that they don't put stats for each and every type of animal. It's just you have three different types. You've got brutes, predators, and sneaks with a stat block set. It gives you your basic stat block. So if you want to be a brute, you're probably something like a bear or tiger, but nothing prevents you from being a more tiger-like sneak, which will be more, of course, emphasized on agility and a few other things.
Yeah, I like that. Interface 0 at something like that if you want to play a hybrid. So
right. Those are the races that you can play.
Nice.
Yeah, and this is also the section where they mention some specific edges, such as the Fallen, which are people who have succumbed to the corruption of the Nocturnals, but they're trying to fight it. The Golemoids, which are almost like you can have your Jurak, orcish-like creature, and he can go through a procedure where he can actually replace some of his limbs and body parts with, basically steampunk version of cyberware.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice. So what I like about this is that, like people that would rather play the more standard races can still do that, but people that are looking for something different, like me, then you have different options in there, which is cool for races.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, it could be... you have some variety there and ways to play around it.
So is there a kind of standard adventuring group in this setting, or it depends basically on the type of campaign you're going to run? In other words, is there a meta plot that people have to follow?
No, unless the GM determines what the meta plot is. Of course, the threat of the Nocturnals is always there, present. But there's also, you can downplay that and more emphasize the conflicts between the nations or even within the nations and borders, skirmishes, bandits going across borders and raiding, because this is shortly after, about 10 years after the Darkfall, so people are still fighting to establish themselves. There are still cities are in ruins that can't be accessible anymore. Cities that are rebuilding with all these refugees there, trying to eke out a living with the meager resources they've got. Some nations are faring better than others, but others are very, very much struggling still.
So basically, it's a rebuilding. It's a civilization that is rebuilding, and they need heroes to clear out spots that are tainted, ward off the nocturnals, and maybe help communities rebuild, and then maybe find ancient treasures too from from former civilization.
Because there's some kingdoms that are now ruins and are gone that left legacies and there's a mysteries because before the Darkfall, many powerful wizards disappeared. No one knows why. No one knows if they're dead. So what happened to them and all the stuff that they've created and wrote down and so forth can definitely be campaign plots and hooks for that as well, or simply forging ahead with a new world with from scratch, like Urbana's doing. Like, let's go with technology. That will save us.
All right. So, well, maybe you'd taken notes to talk about this later, but since we're talking about what place do the heroes have in this Aden, is there a plot point campaign that comes with this book?
No. I read through the whole book and doesn't have a plot point campaign, but it just has at the end of chapter 7 an introduction adventure with a small map for a fortified town village called the Scourge of Sildan, so it can help you launch maybe as an idea. But no, there's no plot point campaign.
And I mean, I know I see releases for this setting all the time, so there must be more adventures for that, right?
They've published a few things. I know there are some that are still published or available under I think it's the D20 system that could easily just take it for the fluff and adapt it. And a few books that they've actually carried over to the Savage World. So I think there's Cities of Aden and Villains, I believe it is. So you've got those key NPCs and they statted out with their motivations, their history, and so forth, written out in the cities of.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, not every setting needs or should have a plot point campain, but it's good to know for people. I know some people will only buy a setting if there's a plot point campaign in it, and others don't care for them. So this one leaves it open. There's enough information here and there spread out. When you read about the different nations, that could spring ideas, for a story arc or a one shot or an entire campaign. All right. So let's talk about the magic and probably technology that probably falls into the same category here. So what can you expect? What kind of arcane backgrounds can you pick, or magic items can you buy or find?
Right. First off, let's say, magic and its unique magical disciplines. From the core book, you can use the standard priest and wizard. They mentioned that briefly, without any changes, unless you want to tweak it for your own campaign.
Is there a god section?
They have, yes, religion and gods. Yeah.
All right, cool.
They do mention that the major faiths, actually in chapter 1. Some are very similar to our own. There's one, of course, very much like Catholic Church, and then there are some that are more esoteric or unique, or some that are more akin to the Zen Buddhism or Shinto of Japan.
Huh. All right.
But as far as magic, you've got a few magical arcane backgrounds you can choose that are unique. One is called the Entomancer. Basically, their magic is all the trappings that revolve around the insect world. They're very close to insects. If they had a familiar, it would be a very large bug.
Summoning swarms,
exactly. Allies that are large, the giant scorpions or whatnot. Their bolt spell could be a swarm of insects that crawl up from the ground and engulf their enemies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool.
So they're very attuned to the insect world. Then you've got the Steamwright, which is basically the weird scientist, the mad scientist, weird science from the core book. So they talk a little bit about that, but there's not many changes. You just call it a Steamwright. So he can invent different either alchemical items, short-lived alchemical items, and longer-term or permanent effects, like a blunderbuss kind of weapon that is enhanced. Then you've got the Mecha Mage. Basically, just the guy who can make and repair all kinds of technology and maintain constructs. They can even have a golem as an extra ally for them, and they maintain it and repair it. Almost like a bodyguard.
So are those, well, from what I'm hearing, they're constructs, but when I hear mecha, I'm thinking a suit that, well, a vehicle, basically, that you get into. Is there something like that in there, in that setting?
I believe so. You can, they talk a little bit about what the mecha mage, or they use mecha magic term to represent all kinds of things that everything that a mecha mage can do. But it's not just mecha as in a riding piece of armor. It's more for golems like creatures. But I could easily see, especially a Goro or one of those fairykins which are small, create a golem that has a cockpit that he can hide in while he's directing his golem extra ally as his actions to fight. So, and he'd have the benefit of the protection.
Well, fair enough. I mean, I think it's cool. I was just curious because of the name and exactly what it meant. So it's basically Dr. Frankenstein type of guy, but with golems.
Yeah, exactly. A variation of a bit of the Mecha Mage is the Thunder Scout. Those are the pilots of those all-terrain vehicles, basically. So they're a bit like the Mecha Mage and a Steamwright. But, of course, instead of a construct or semi-sentient golem, they're just concentrating on maintaining and using their vehicle to the optimal levels, so they can make sure it still runs even if it's damaged, get some extra juice out of it when they need to, extra push of speed. So they have a fairly good link to them, a bit like I said earlier, a bit like a ranger would have with his animal companion. And the last one is a seer, which are an ancient order of wizards that saw and can predict the future. In some ways, they were supposed to be like the guardians of Aden to prevent a lot of catastrophes and wars. In some ways, I compare them a bit to Jedi, without the laser swords.
So, do they get new powers for that, or how does it work? Or is it just seer, but like you said, just Jedi? It's more like a knight or paladin in a way. Yeah,
a little bit like a knight paladin. They have a limited repertoire of spells. They don't have all of the ones that let's say a wizard would have. What they do have can help them in their fights, but they're almost extinct because it seems like the Nocturnals wiped them out.
Well, of course.
Because, of course, they were able to see into the future that if they had left them alone, they probably would have been able to prevent the Nocturnals from invading. So they're trying to stay a bit low key to prevent them, the survivors, from being killed as well.
So are their powers more like combat oriented or more like utility powers?
There's a variety. It's not just combat. They have on page 40 the chart that says which powers each arcane background has, and the Seer can have stuff like banish and beast friend. Boost and lower trait, far sight, far speech. There's a few powers that are unique to this setting, but they list them here as well. Speak languages, slow, warrior's gift. And what's cool about the powers is that they do list all the powers that are in the core book and the new unique ones, but they don't go through all the stats of those that are already in the core book. They just mention what the power will look like for whatever arcane background can use it. For example, Bolt, all they have is the 3 lines. One for Steamright, says it's an energy gun. For a Wizard, it's shards of elemental energy. And then it says all others, it's not available.
Yeah, a bit like Deadlands then. That makes sense. Yeah, it's easy. Just trappings.
Well, exactly. So you don't waste space going through all the spells and descriptions that already are in the core book. Mm-hmm. But there's a few that are unique, such as Golem Breath, Hell Driver for the the Thunder Scouts, and Mecha Mage to avoid the Repair Vehicle, which is the equivalent of healing for for a mechanical construct.
Oh, nice. So what about the gear and that kind of stuff? Well, what can we expect in that book?
All right. Well, gear, of course, being a world that has lots of technology, you have a good repertoire to choose from, and of course, since we're talking technology, we're talking, of course, guns, and I already mentioned the Thunder Trains, the Thunder Scout vehicles, trikes or quads or whatever you prefer describing them as. And you also have firearms.
It sounds like a setting for Jamie, right? With bikes and quads and trikes. So.
Yeah, you could pretend at least to still be able to drive one of those. Uh-huh. So yeah, you've got some weapons that are almost like take a normal axe or sword and add some steampunk technology to it. So you'll have the lightning sword, the magma axe, and the thunder hammer, which has all kinds of little gears and knobs and coils to represent the power they've got.
So is it just like a trapping, an elemental trapping to it, or there's more to those items?
No, it's not necessarily a trapping. I mean, you could say almost a trapping, yeah, because, let's say, for example, the magma axe features a miniature forge fastened to the blade, and when powered, it ignites and causes the blade to glow with molten heat. So some of these items have what's called steam points, which represents almost like energy, like essence or power points that are invested in these items, almost like charges. So if you spend one of these steam points, on your turn as a free action, you ignite the magma axe, and then on your next turn, you'll be able to gain the fire.
Dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Or gain the fire, heat, flammable, fatigue trappings from the spells.
Oh, pretty simple.
Yeah, and you even have a passive ability that it always sheds light as a torch and can easily ignite flammable objects with a touch. And if you want to cook wieners, you can do that too.
Perfect. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first one to think of that. So
no, exactly. And then you've got the ranged weapons. Like I said, the firearms or something that is present, and they do a good job of describing it. It's a little bit like a transition phase between, let's say, the first generation.
Powder.
Yeah, black powder stuff, and some of the rifles especially look a little bit more refined, as if they've spent more time improving the technology. So it almost looks like the Smith & Wesson kind of rifles.
So you don't have like very long reload times for these weapons, do you?
You have a short reload, usually at least one action.
Oh, that's standard.
Yeah.
Compared to Awful One, where some weapons take like 10 rounds to reload.
Yeah, no, they're pretty fast. It's almost as if the ammunition, you don't have to put powder, then tap it in, then put the shot, and then
Right.
So it's a little quicker that way, and force armor, and even have siege weapons if you need it.
Anything?
Storm cannon.
Any artillery?
Well, that's it. You've got the Caraway ballista, similar to a ballista, but a little bit different. With the way it's been improved, it takes less time to reload. Then you've got the cannons. You actually have cannons, of course, more powered by magic than black powder, but then they mentioned the different types of shots: solid shot, canister, explosive, and incendiary. And even the storm cannons, which are even bigger versions of the standard light cannon. So you could have naval battles too, with the big 3-masted galleons with 40 guns and so forth, and a few vehicles: the Thunder Cycle, the steam wagons, the Dragon gliders, which are kind of hand glider thing with a bit of a small engine to help propel you.
All right, so now that we're talking about the technology, so I'm going to ask you this. Well, actually, C.L. Taylor asked this question. He says, how did Stefan feel this setting compared to similar settings in regards to the steampunk aspect?
Right. So, yeah, I have read some steampunk novels and a few settings as well, and even played in Eberron, which in some ways was inspired by steampunk. In some ways, when I saw the Kickstarter, I thought, great, this would be a setting similar to Eberron without me having to buy all the, Wizards of the Coast books for all the fluff. Mm-hmm. I could start new and I can invent my own information, my own dogma, not dogma, but
plot, meta plot,
yeah,
all that.
Meta plot, exactly. So it has some similarities there, but it's not a carbon copy. I mean, it was created even way before Eberron as a computer game. So, and compared to other steampunks, it has some flair. I mean, not the whole world is steampunk-like. There's only the nation of Urbana that's heavily steampunk, and even then, it's like rampant with pollution and poverty. You're either extremely rich or most likely very poor.
So basically, like Victorian London.
Yeah, Victorian London. Lots, like I said, pollutions, industries are popping up everywhere, and a lot of people work in these factories to create all this technology and help protect the nation. And these thunder trains roll across. They don't need tracks because they're so big, they're almost like treads instead. And they thunder across the land. In certain cities, you've got train stations big enough to accommodate them, to be able to trade with those kingdoms. So in some ways, they're responsible for a lot of trade still being possible, despite all the dangers of the wilderness and the nocturnals. Although a lot of creatures and people, or in general, try to attack these trains because, of course, they're big targets, but they're heavily defended. So they're like skyscrapers lying down. They're not just little trains like you see in the Wild West. No, these are quite a few stories up. You see on the cover, they're huge with many, many cannons. all over, and lots of vehicles inside to help defend them.
Good luck with that, huh?
Yep.
Challenge accepted.
That's it. So you might not be able to stop the train, but you might be able to infiltrate it to gain the cargo that you're looking for. That could be part of an adventure.
Sounds exciting. Well, there you go, C.L. Taylor. Thank you for the question. Here's another one. This one from Conrad, our good friend Conrad. Does the setting give a more heroic feel, or does it lean toward horror? Because I mean, you mentioned the nocturnals, but then you've got all these arcane backgrounds, crazy stuff, crazy weapons, and all that.
Yeah. From what the book I've read, I've read cover to cover. They don't put a huge emphasis on the nocturnals. Even in the bestiary, there's a few creatures described, and they can. You even have a template, a very short template that you can add to an existing creature. So you have an alligator nocturnal if you want, but that's about it. You can invent your own creatures if you want for that, but it's more of an emphasis on the action, the technology that can be used by the players and PCs. The internal conflict between these different factions, as well as they're trying to forge a new life in this new world now, with always the little threat of the nocturnals being there.
Right, so no setting rules to try to enforce some type of grittiness in there.
No. Actually, I looked everywhere for that and see if they had a specific set of setting rules, or even suggest some of the setting rules from the core book, and no, you can use whatever you want. If you wanted grittier, use gritty damage. If you want more heroic, heroes never die and Joker's wild, go for it. But they don't say that you should use this and don't use that. It's totally up to the people at the table.
Basically, you choose the tone you want to use for your campaign. So exactly. Any setting rules in there?
No. Like I said, no setting rules are mentioned at all.
At all? Oh, that's good. So just straight up, basically.
Exactly. You can use it as core like that. Throw in a few that you like. If you like Joker's Wild, which a lot of people do, go ahead. You want rule specialization, use that until the new edition comes out, and we'll see what new setting rules that they come up with in the Adventures edition. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing, because then it makes it easier to be compatible, I guess, with the new edition.
Exactly. You just have to tweak maybe the powers and the edges, but that's no big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about briefly there about the bestiary and something about a template, but is there any kind of bestiary in there, or are you just given the template and make your own stuff?
No, there is quite a few unique creatures to it. So they have a short bestiary at the end, chapter 6, Perils of Aden. So they'll have stats for the animated objects from the power, a couple of golems, or golemoid horse. So you can basically have a steam-powered horse. Those illithics, those insect-like creatures that you might be able to go up against that are part of the hive mind, drones and guardians, nagas, and a few other creatures if you're up in the frozen north, a snow serpent, and then a short description of a few different nocturnal creatures, like a corrupted boulette. Everyone knows the land shark that's popular in the D20 system. Well, there's a corrupted version there. Variation of a ghoul called a cackler, which can, its laughter can make you go mad.
Reference to Deadlands here. Cackler.
Maybe. The Wasted, which is almost someone who's put too much of that golemoid cyberware in them, and now they've suffered some points. That's another thing we can go through later on. But if you get too much of these the cyberware. It can go, you can go crazy, and you're almost like an undead with all these cybernetic parts. So basically, you're a Frankenstein's monster.
Because I was going to say the Wasted, that's going to be you and I at Con and a Cob next month.
Pretty much the whole bunch of us, some skinny wasted, some fat wasted.
Wasted all over. Nice.
Yeah.
So what about maybe 20, 30 pages worth of bestiary in there?
Not even that. Maybe 10.
10? Oh, okay. Wow.
You can use a lot of features from the core book, some from fantasy or horror companion, and just tweak them. Like I said, there's a creating golemoid creatures, has a little template for that, and even creating nocturnals. It's not a huge paragraph, it's just a small box. They gain fear, better armor, a couple of new edges, and low light vision. So you can easily just say, okay, this alligator, like I said earlier, is now a nocturnal kind of creature. It has dark scales and tentacles and spews poison. There you go. It's a nocturnal.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's fairly easy to do that with Savage Worlds, so.
That's it. So whatever your imagination can come up with, there's a nocturnal probably for it. Go watch the movie The Thing and come back.
So how big of a book is this? How many pages?
117, so it's not too thick. So maybe a bit more than a quarter inch thick. So it's not a heavy tome. You can easily read through it. I don't read that fast, so maybe with my spare time. With my spare time, maybe a week, and I was done with it.
Oh, I like it. I like it's around 100 pages. I mean, that helps.
Yeah.
Anything else in there? You mentioned an adventure, and then after chapter 6, what is there?
After chapter 6 is the chapter 7, the adventure, the Scourge of Sildan. It's not too long. It's about maybe not even 5 pages. But it has a nice map of the village that's involved in the adventure, and a world map at the end with all the major cities and the borders. One thing that I wanted to mention, I mentioned the technology and the golemoids. You can have a character who puts all the steampunk, mechanical arm, torso, legs, an eye into them. They can do that and become more and more cybernetic, but there is a cost to that. But you have to have that arcane background golemoid.
Okay.
That means you can add more of this technology to your body without suffering the wasting. That's the thing I was looking for.
Yeah, the wasted. So instead of picking new powers with that arcane background, you pick like mods, or you pick a power and you put a trapping of a piece of golemoid.
Well, if it's not listed, they do have a list of manite implants, they call them. Mm-hmm. You've got minor ones such as chest spikes or a body compartment or a finger gun. Then you've got basic manite implants such as a fist cannon, a manite speed booster, which in some ways could be the speed power, steam breath, a utility arm, and even advanced and superior implants. And we start going to more heavily modified bodies, such as the greater empowered strikes. So you're more powerful steam pistons and so forth. You can really make very powerful punches if you want. Underwater adaptation, so you can basically have gills and underwater jets to maneuver in water.
So that manite thing, is it raw? Does it have any kind of property, or is it more like in Deadlands, Ghost Rock, that it's supposed to power that stuff, that technology, but you don't really You know, even if you find some ghost rock, you can't do anything with it.
No, once you find manite, it has to be processed and refined. It doesn't supply you with a source of power itself. You still need, let's say, like a steam, actually, like steam engine. That's why you've got, for a lot of these technology things, steam points, which represents, basically a battery. But the manite at least will give you the material that will accept all these powers and abilities into them. So it's almost like a
battery.
Yeah, exactly. Like having mithril or adamantite is easier to enchant than iron, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense.
Because it's a magical metal.
So have you played that setting yet?
No, unfortunately. I was still busy with another setting. So I was trying to finish that, and I never got around to it. But I do like it. Even rereading it is like, yeah, this really could work, But you need people also who are interested in that kind of setting, who would be into it as well. And it would be cool to have a variety of players. One person who might be a golemoid, another person who's a giraffe, Farron.
That's me, yeah.
Looking over everyone's shoulders. He's the lookout.
I mean, I think it's exciting. I think it sounds like a lot of fun, and
yeah.
I mean, I'm the guy who's always down on everything, basically. So it sounds pretty cool.
This has a little bit of everything, and then Chapter 5 describes the different kingdoms in more detail. So the type of government, the history, important characters, relationships with other nations and culture, even a little bit of, there's usually always a little bit of a section about the military organization of that nation. And you have a good variety of different nations to choose from if you want to adventure in them or send your heroes into them or simply as an origin for their background.
So even though there's only one adventure in there, there's still, like you read that chapter 5, is there a lot of story seeds, adventure seeds?
Oh, yeah, I found quite a few ideas like, ooh, that would be a pretty cool one here, another one cool there, depending on the focus you want. If you want a Mad Max one, the Ran 8 has plenty of ideas for running adventures there where you're trying very hard to survive, fighting for resources, or you're part of the nation of Aristine, which is almost an ideal kingdom trying to survive, very Arthurian chivalry with the elven population and so forth. So almost typical medieval style, but still influenced by technology a little bit. So you can help your nation to try and fight off and try to keep its natural beauty, like in that one.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, there's even what I like about this one setting as well. The elves, instead of just being forest-dwelling, nature-loving people, some of them are, but there's an actual nation called Vanora, the Empire of the Beasts, which is ruled by an emperor, the Dragon Emperor, and the look basically is very much feudal Japanese. So basically you've got samurai elves.
Badass.
Yeah, which means you also by definition get ninja elves.
Ninja elves.
With
robot parts, with golem.
If they want, yes.
Golem elves, ninjas.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Exactly. That's where you get the mecha samurai armor.
Unstoppable.
Yeah. Yep. Call it the Thunderscape. It looks like Gary and just farts. Area attacks.
Well, let me know if you ever run a one shot or something like
Yes.
that, I'd be interested in trying
Cool.
this out.
Nice. I'll definitely let you know at one point when I have a bit of time and put some other things aside. You'll be first on my list.
Yeah, and in the meantime, people, I hope you enjoy this. I hope this excites you. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect with Thunderscape. Usually everything we we review, I have a good idea what it is, or I've read it, but this one, I didn't know. So, happily surprised, and looking forward to getting my own copy and reading it.
I think it's still available on Drive-Thru-RPG, and I think you can get the print on demand. I wanted to check, but I'm not sure 100%, but you can definitely get the PDF.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it a couple weeks ago when I was thinking of actually getting it and reviewing it, but I'm glad you did it instead. So thank you very much for this, for taking the time to read it again and take notes.
Yeah, no problem. I think the only thing I hadn't read completely was the Nations, so I spent a lot of time rereading that and still glossing at least over as much detail as possible, as quickly as possible for the other chapters to make sure I covered most bases.
Anything you didn't like in this book?
There's not much. I mean, it's unique enough. Maybe the only thing I didn't like was they tried to be too different with the goblins and orcs. It's like, and by giving them different names, you could just call them orcs and goblins and be done with it. But no, you have to find a new name. So sometimes that, for a while, it was like, I'm never going to remember those names. But I guess if you play regularly enough, okay, Goro and Jurak will start rolling off the tongue a bit better.
Well, it's minor quibble.
Yeah, but other than that, no, not really. It covers all the bases without locking you into, well, this has to be how it is. Like, you can run with a few tweaks of the rules if you want, and like, no, this is how we'll run this nation. It's a little bit different, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fairly positive review, so that's good, especially after my Beasts and Barbarians Steel Edition review, so that's good.
Yeah, good.
So this was Thunderscape.
Wild Die Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Die Podcast.